Sandwich bread has always been one of those things that I don't really like buying. It's full of ingredients I can't pronounce, it's flavourless, and it's a bit dull. But the trouble is, I love sandwiches. This leaves me in a bit of a pickle. So I discovered this Turkish bread recipe that seems to solve all the problems. It's delicious, quick to pull together, doesn't require any kneading or any special equipment. It sounds perfect, so let's see if it's any good. To get started, we're going to make a pre-ferment. This is one of the crucial steps for this to be a no-knead bread recipe, and it's also going to make sure the yeast is active. To a bowl, add 100 grams of white flour. I'm using flour with 11.5% protein. This could be higher if that's what you have. 10 grams of active dried yeast, 6 grams of sugar. This is a slightly heaped teaspoon if your scales aren't super accurate, and 200 ml of water. The water ideally wants to be lukewarm to make this fermentation process as quick as possible. Mix all of that together until there are no lumps of flour. Cover the bowl with something and leave it to sit in a warm area for 30 minutes. If your kitchen is a bit cooler, you can put the bowl into your oven that's off, but with the light on. This creates a warm environment. After 30 minutes, this pre-ferment is super active. It's bubbling like a mini volcano. This is a great sign. We've got active yeast and it's become super loose and a little elastic. This shows that we have some gluten development. Into a large mixing bowl, add 500 grams of white flour, 40 ml or a shot of olive oil, 5 grams of salt, once again this is around a slightly heaped teaspoon, and 160 ml of milk mixed with 60 ml of water at a lukewarm temperature once again. Lots of people seem to get hung up or confused on this temperature, so here's what I do. I just stick my finger into the liquid. It wants to feel around the same temperature as you, but it could also be room temperature. Even ice cubes would work. It would just take a long time to get going. The colder it all is, the longer the fermentation time. For those of you who like to be technical, you want to be anywhere between 30 to 35 Celsius. 38 Celsius is the maximum before you start to risk killing the yeast. For this amount of liquid, it took 10 seconds in the microwave to get to the right temperature. Don't go putting it in there for 5 minutes and dunking your hand in. That's going to be painful. Add all of that to the bowl with the pre-ferment and mix with a sturdy spoon, a spatula, or even a wooden spoon until you have a shaggy, extremely sticky dough with no dry patches. You can of course use a stand mixer, but this literally took me 30 seconds to mix together, so there's no point in really making yourself the extra washing up. This doesn't look pretty at this stage, but don't worry, with a little time, everything will change. Cover that and leave it to rest until it's at least doubled in size. Depending on how warm your kitchen is, this could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. Exactly 47 minutes later, my dough has more than doubled in size. It's gassy, it smells yeasty, and it's got a great wobble. I like putting a mark on the bowl so I can see the rising progress over time. This is 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes. And just so you know, my kitchen has been 24 degrees Celsius this whole time. Lightly dust the top of your dough with some flour and dust the work surface as well. This is a sticky dough, and if we let it, it'll stick to everything it touches. So this light coating of flour helps us to prevent that. Using a dough scraper with a curved edge that's also dusted with a little flour, gently pour the dough out of the bowl onto the work surface. Just give it a little helping hand with the dough scraper. Using a lightly floured dough scraper again, split the dough into 2 pieces. Get a little flour on your hands and shape each piece into a rough rectangle. Then grab the top 2 corners and fold them down 2/3 of the way. Then grab the bottom 2 corners and fold them over that, so that you have this rough cylinder shape. Do the same with the other piece of dough and try to get them roughly the same shape and size. This is creating a little tension in the dough, which will give us some oven spring when we bake it. Place them onto a baking tray that's lined with parchment paper with the seam of the dough facing down. A great way to stop baking paper sliding around on the tray is just to wet the tray a little, then the paper will stick to the tray rather than the dough. Now stretch the dough out to fill the tray a little more, until you have 2 rectangle shapes that are filling 70 to 80% of the tray. Try to get the thickness as even as you can. Now we're going to leave it to sit until it's puffed up and it looks close to double in size once again. Give it the time it needs to get gassed up again. Cover the dough with another tray or some cling film. At this point, you can preheat your oven to 250 Celsius, 482 Fahrenheit. My dough took just over 30 minutes to get to this stage where it's ready to bake. It's puffed up and it's close to double the size it was half an hour ago. Next, you can brush the top of the dough with some egg wash. Traditionally, this is done with an equal mix of egg yolk, yogurt, and water, which is what I'm using here. You could also use egg yolk with an equal amount of water or even just some olive oil. You don't have to use a wash at all, but it does give the bread that glorious golden crust once it's baked. And to make this look like more of a traditional looking Turkish pide, wet your fingers with a little water water and make deep indentations along the dough. I'm doing 3 horizontal lines so the dough is divided into 4 pieces. This is going to give us texture and roughly mark the portions of the bread. Sprinkle over some sesame seeds and a little flaky salt. Then place a baking dish or a tray with some boiling water into your preheated oven. This water needs to be boiling so it creates steam straight away. Room temperature water wouldn't do anything. Then bake the bread for 20 to 30 minutes until you have an evenly golden crust and it looks incredible. Place it onto a cooling rack and let it cool down and finish cooking. Once you're comfortable with the process of making this bread, it's so easy to fit it around the other things in your day. There's only about 10 or 15 minutes of actual hands-on work. The rest of the time is the resting periods and waiting for it to rise. This bread's crust is quite hard when it first comes out of the oven, but once it cools down, it becomes soft and bouncy. This makes it a great option for sandwiches. It has an impressive amount of gluten development considering it's had no kneading at all. I just cut the loaf into 8 portions and freeze them. They defrost super quick and you wouldn't know they've been frozen. They are no different once defrosted. You could easily multiply this recipe by 3 or 4 and make a month's worth of bread in a couple of hours. Every time I make this recipe, I'm completely blown away with how great the results are and how easy it is to do. If you're looking for another quick, easy and tasty recipe, go check this video out next, and I'll see you next time.